أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome back to another episode of Her Thoughts, where today we will be discussing the topic of marriage, in particular early marriage. Now we have revelations that tell us that on the day of Ashura in Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salam recited the nikah for his nephew, the son of Imam Hassan, Shah Qasim, to his daughter Sayyidah Sakina alayhi salam. Now, although this is questionable, and people have questioned whether this actually took place or not, the hidden meaning and the hidden questions around this is, why did Imam Hussein do this? Did he do this for his Shia, for us to understand something about this? Was there a deeper meaning? Was there a deeper rooted meaning behind this? And we know that early marriage in Islam, there is an emphasis on early marriage in Islam. So the question really arises, today in our generation, we see many youths getting married early. Is there benefits associated with this? Is there difficulties associated with this? And what happens to those youth in their 30s and in their 40s who are not married? How do they deal with this? How do they come to terms with this? Is there a taboo of not being married? And also, is there a taboo associated with wanting to get married early? Again, I'm joined by my lovely sisters, my presenters. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. How are you all?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Good, thank you.
So, sisters, we have, where some revelations say that Imam Hussein did perform the nikah of Shah Qasim to Sayyidah Sakina alayhi salam. And whether this is true or not, we can still take lessons from this revelation to say that, why did he perform the nikah? Was there a hidden meaning? Was he trying to teach us Shia something? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting because I think if you had a son, a nephew and a daughter, and they are the caliber of Ahl Bayt's children, why not? But we're living in a world which is so different, and I think in context to where we are today, times have changed. And I know in cultures it's encouraged for for people to marry as young as possible. And again, most of our family hereditary comes from the East, so cultures are very different. Some are continuing those efforts to marry children as young as possible. But I think in the West we're in a dilemma here, because I think things culturally are very different, laws are different, and I think actually, in Iraq there's a minimum age, isn't there? 16, I believe, I may be incorrect. And likewise here there's a minimum age with parental consent. You can get married at 16. Again, that may be questionable, but having said that, there's a different focus in this day and age. So what Imam is telling us is that it is, there's a guidance there to say, to not prolong, because then we know that the more you prolong youth to not be married, then they can fall into the aspect of sin. Yes. And we don't want our children to be in those, contentious situations where that becomes, and we're responsible for that as parents. So I think for me, that's the major point I would take from that. It's encouraged, and as parents we should encourage it for your children. But like I said, we do have differences, I think, in this day and age. Again, sisters, you may disagree, agree.
I was just going to say, just following on from what you said, our culture is different, our time is different. That doesn't mean that we discard all the guidance, but at the same time we have to contextualize everything. So, for example, yes, the Ahl Bayt did encourage earlier marriage, not to delay it, but if you've got an individual who perhaps doesn't have the emotional maturity or doesn't have the emotional intelligence yet, or the focus for them at the moment is something completely not marriage, you can't flick a switch and say, right, get married, because then perhaps you're creating more, just playing devil's advocate here. But
what would you say to those parents that perhaps they're still a first generation children here, the parents with very strong cultural identity, where they say to their children, well, actually, daughter's 18, 19, you're getting old, this is the time for you to get married, I don't want you to be 20. How would they turn around and say that well, actually, I'm not emotionally ready, or I'm not, I want to study? They'll say, there's so many these situations.
How young is young as well, really?
But the question is, how are we going to let society dictate what is too young or what is too old? Because, like, for example, if you read about Henry VIII, let's say the kings and queens of even England, they got married very young, and the women they got married to were very young. I mean, Henry VIII, his wives were like young.
Mashallah.
And even Queen Elizabeth, by the way, she got married 21, but she met her husband when she was 8 years old. And then at 13 years old...
Really? 8 years old?
8 years old.
Wow.
And then at 13 years old, they were exchanging love letters. So, and he was 18, by the way. So to this generation, he was an adult and she was a child. So they will frown upon that. But the thing is, if we let society dictate what is young, what is old, what is young, what is old, so then that's ever changing. And I don't feel that is the case. But I just want to say, just adding on to what you said, I think we shouldn't focus about age, but we should focus about if someone is ready to get married.
Intellect.
I have seen girls, even living today, that are ready to get married at a very, very young age. Let's say 16, 17, they have the maturity of probably a 35-year-old of someone else. But then I've seen other people that are probably 25 and they still don't have the maturity or even the desire to get married. So I think we should look at the individual and if they're ready to get married or not, rather than the age. For example, me and my sisters, we all got married before the age of 20, like 16, 17, 18, even before 16, but let's not go 16, 17, 18, 19, we all got married. By 20, every single one of us was married. And I feel like I was ready to get married at 19. And even when I went to university, the people in university were like, I came in one day with a wedding ring and they said, oh my God, you're married. And even I remember there was no Muslims in the course. I was studying media and they were saying, oh my God, you're a bit young getting married. Why are you getting married at 19? And that's what they thought, but I felt like I was ready. And as we were saying before the break, in this country, people at 10 years old have boyfriends. So,
but
how is that okay? And then not.
But I think even when we're looking at the society we're living in, things are changing here as well. My daughter's got a friend who's a devout Christian. She's mid-20s now, and she will not have she'll have a boyfriend, but she won't. You know, there'll be nothing illicit there. She wants to get married, and then she wants to have a proper relationship. So, and they're not looking at sort of like, you know, the boyfriend thing. She's not had boyfriends since a young, you know, like she's 13. That wasn't the type of family she came from. But I think even in the Western society, religion is taking more of an impact in certain, you know, communities. Yeah. But I do think that, you know, where you're saying people marry, like, you know, ask the daughters or, you know, should they get married? I mean, I had an early marriage, and I know other people who got married at 19. And then there's this shift of identifying who you are. And so I went to university when I was in I had my children, and then I went in my 23, 25, I was doing my master's. And it was obviously everything was back to front. Now, I wish my life would have been the other way around. Not that I regret it. It just made things a lot harder. And then I changed as a person. And I think I wasn't ready to get married. And it was because my parents thought Sharia, and they were, you know, immigrants, and they were very simple. So they thought, that, you know, it's the best thing in this society. We don't want our daughter to have a boyfriend. Now, they didn't know what a nerd I was, that I would never have gone to that path. But I respect their judgment there.
So you think in hindsight, you wish you had waited, or you would
have the option to have waited.
Yeah, or you would have been a bit older before.
Definitely, yeah.
But that's the thing. Why do people say they're married? Like when people don't want to get married, they say, we want to study, but why is it either studying or marriage? Like I hadn't graduated when I got married, but then, and he was in university as well, but then I found it beautiful that we were both studying together.
I mean,
and we both went to university.
My story is similar to yours, Zahra, because I was engaged whilst I was in university to my husband, and we got married straight, so we had about a 2-year engagement period. And we got married straight after my pre-registration year was done. So as soon as I actually qualified, I was married straight away. And I remember I qualified in the September and I was married in the November and, you know, working full time after honeymoon in January.
Were you personally ready?
I think, I mean, I was young as well. I was about, 22 when I got married. I had my daughter, Sakina was born when I was 25. So, in essence, I've grown up with my husband.
Well,
you know.
I've grown up, I feel with my children.
Yes.
Which is
And I find that beautiful. When I see Zahra with her children, I'm like, that's I love
the
that.
relationship.
But alhamdulillah, it's come out like that. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of struggles, like
Absolutely.
because you again the maturity of raising children. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah for
That's
everything Allah has
Yeah.
blessed me with.
Yes.
I would never ever change my life for anything. But there, you know, nowadays where they say that, you know, you were saying about emotional maturity. If a girl, you know, when a girl's ready to get married, to take
True.
that responsibility.
So like what you're saying is there's benefits, but there's also difficulty as well, and it depends on an individual level.
Yeah, it depends on the individual.
It depends
Also,
on, and it also
Saida.
depends on the situation that you are in at the time. So your spouse, if you have a very understanding spouse, or
Yeah.
you have a very understanding family
It
that
depends
you've
who you
been
get married
married
to.
to. Yes,
Definitely. Exactly.
If you're married into a very understanding family, then that as a newly married wife helps you a lot, because you have to understand, still at the age of 21, 22, we are still, we're
Yes.
fairly young
Yes.
at that point. You think about it, we've come out straight from university, we've left our parents' houses, we've come straight from university, and you know, a lot of us do live with our in-laws, especially for the first few years of your lives. So
But say that, I'd also say that you know, there's a big thing about the millennial generation that is, you know, coming up, and they're not prepared for responsibility.
Yes.
And so even my son, my younger son, will say, you know, for instance, he'll say, "Mum, there's not girls like you that would be happy to cook because
Yeah.
you know
Yes.
you love, you know, enjoy your family, cooking for your
Yes.
family. You have a career, you know, all of this." And he said, "The girls nowadays, first, I'm not living with your parents. I'm not going to be cooking for you."
think it's a generation
It's a generation
thing
thing. So
now.
how can we
It's
say?
a generation thing, but also I think it's how marriage is looked at. So, for example, ideally, you know, marriage is something you want to look forward to. You want to feel like it's going to open more doors, more opportunities. You have someone to support you. But for a lot of people, especially nowadays, when you talk to perhaps people that don't see marriage from a religious lens,
Yes.
it's when you settle down, when you're kind of done doing everything you want to do with your life, and you want to wind down, or in some cultures it's so that, you know, my daughter doesn't do this or doesn't do that, and it's more of a limiting factor rather than a liberating factor. And I think that plays a big role in how a marriage ends up in the end.
I also think that we are so blessed to be born into this religion. We're so blessed to be Shia that we look at marriage through a different, almost through different eyes than say other people often. You know, some of you may have seen it. You know where you have shows on TV, matchmaking shows, and the women and the men, they come out with so many different criteria. My husband has to, my future partner has to have this and tall and this education and this. And we know that in Islam, half of your deen is completed if you get married. And that's not to say that everybody's marriage is a bed of roses. That's not to say that every marriage is perfect. But we also know that you have to compromise and you go through struggles and you grow up with your life partner. And I think because we also have the kind of deen and our religion to keep us grounded, I think sometimes that helps us as well. Because sometimes I think when I compare myself to, say, not so much now, but when I was younger and I had got married and I compared myself to my friends of that age, they were like, "I can't believe you're married," or "I can't believe you have a child now," you know. And a lot of friends, you know, they got married later and they had their children later. For me now, I think it's nice because my children are at that age where they can be left for a little while, and I don't have to worry about them as much. And so for me, there are benefits in getting married early.
But going back to your point about, I think where we're blessed with Ahl Bayt, and I absolutely agree with you, is that we have the teachings and the groundwork and the guidelines to tell us what the criteria. But I think, unfortunately, I'm not sure how much that's implemented.
I mean, I 100%
and I've
agree.
had brothers really struggle to get married, and the one that I have in mind, alhamdulillah, has got married, but he struggled for years. He said girls want a house, they want the career, they want your certain figures that you should be earning, and he said, you know, I haven't got that at the moment, or I'm too young, or whatever it is, they have the criteria. And I think it's such a shame that when we have the guidelines and the guidance, we aren't adhering to those, and we're falling into the trap of what society is saying. This is exactly what the sister said.
And the thing is, that's the beauty, because when we read about the marriage of Fatima Zahra and Imam Ali, we're like, this is the perfect marriage. But then they got married with hardly anything, and that's the thing. And when we think about our own parents, they got married without, probably with not owning much as well. But then the beauty of marriage is you build together,
and you grow up together,
and you grow up together. That's the thing. And another thing is, this is my own opinion, that I feel the younger you are, the more likely you will adapt to each other.
Yes.
And I'm just going back to my own life. When I was 19, anything, I remember they even asked me, they were like, what do you want as your wedding dress? I was like, anything, I don't mind. Just give me anything.
You're moldable.
Yeah, anything. I was like, everything. I didn't have an opinion on anything. But now, I'm thinking now, in my 30s, I think, yeah.
Would you really, Zahra? Would you though? Because I know I've raised a daughter. She's, you know, at marriageable age now, and I know that the person she hasn't got these world. Her criteria is about, you know, okay, religion and all of this.
But I think that's your upbringing. That's how you.
But her upbringing, I'm sure. Oh, she's saying that, but I wonder.
I don't know. But I think when the older you get, the more set in your ways you are.
Absolutely.
That you won't be able to kind of mold your life to fit someone. It's harder.
I don't disagree.
But I do agree what you said.
But we have a responsibility, don't we?
I'll probably still say I don't mind.
Exactly.
Actually, my husband asked me last week, what do you want for lunch? I was like, I don't know. Just get me anything. But
I think what comes down to is that as mothers, we have responsibility to ensure that our daughters are not the ones that are saying, or we're not the ones saying, well, actually, can you show me what, you know, diamond ring she's going to have? You know, these aren't going to be important. Money will come and go at the end, as Rasulullah said. It's the character of the person. And if you have a good, you know, like you're saying, you know, all your sisters got married, you know, in families, they're young. If a good spouse, you know, potential comes, why wouldn't you say, why would you say no? You know,
this is it. If the potential is there, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent him down to, you know, to the boy or to the girl for a reason, because marriages, we know, inshallah, they're made in Jannah.
Exactly.
So, and that actually brings us beautifully to our letter of today, which says, Assalamu alaikum. I am open to the idea of marriage, and I personally feel like I am ready and mature enough to take this step in my life. I strongly believe that in this day and age, early marriage is very important, as it refrains anyone from committing haram, which is what you were saying. But people around me are constantly saying I am too young, and my family are refusing all the suitors without my knowledge. How can I deal with this delay, and how can I overcome this issue with my family? So this is like a very kind of, it's a difficult situation that this sister's in, because she feels that she's ready, but her family must feel that she's too young. And again,
does she say how old she is?
There's no age here. No, there's no age here. But it almost feels as if, I mean, she must be young. She must be maybe in her teens. And it's like her family.
It's tough, especially because she's a girl. Because if it was a man that had written this in, I mean, I hope none of our viewers are judging, but usually I feel like as soon as a girl says, oh, I want to get married, and people around her don't agree, she's kind of under more scrutiny, or you're desperate, or that kind of thing. Whereas I feel a lot easier for a man to say, okay, I'm ready, can we start looking for something?
But is a girl who, I mean, if we take this sister's example, if she's in her teens, and if she wants to get married and she feels she's ready, is she seen as desperate? Would you think that people would judge her as being desperate?
It depends on the family. If the family, I mean, for me in this particular question, and for examples that this is, you know, this is obviously happening and it does happen, I think as parents, what we were saying just a bit earlier, that we have a big responsibility to actually, each child is different. You know, you could have a whole, you know, batch of children, but at the end each one has its own needs, and recognizing when one is ready, it's a blessing, and I think that it should be encouraged. But I would be more worried if I was rushing to marry my child, but that child was not ready, and actually then putting that responsibility on them would be, for me, it would be my responsibility, and be my, you know, I would be accountable for that. But in this case, I think it's the parents should really be, and again, because of the society we're living in, we need to be much more open to our children's needs. It's not what we are used to. As Imam Ali alayhi salam says, every generation is different. And if this generation, if a child came and said to me, I'm ready to get married, I would say, Bismillah, let's start the process.
And we also know that in today's generation, we have so much around us that which is a potential to swerve us from the path of Islam. You know, you just have to switch on social media, and there's so much out there which can actually make us go into the trap of haram. So if this sister is ready, Why
Exactly,
not, you know?
exactly.
I think parents should be transparent with their children, and that is one thing that I think is a lot of frustration between sometimes when the relationship is between a child and a parent, is when the parent is not transparent or the child is not transparent with their parents. There should be a good relationship between the two and transparency between the two. If someone is proposing and then the girl later finds out that someone proposed and they rejected without her knowledge, that person may have been a perfect match for her. So I think there should be transparency. Even if you feel like that person isn't suitable, be transparent with your child and tell them, you know, this person came, we think they're not suitable because X, Y, and Z. Another point is that the average age of marriage is now getting higher, much higher.
Yes.
And before we used to see people getting married much younger, but now it's higher, and that is due to a number of things. Perhaps people are not proposing much earlier. People are waiting until after they they graduate for proposing. All the expectations, you know, the husband is expected to have a job, to have a career, to have this, and that is why the age of marriage is getting pushed up. When I sit down with youngsters and youth, I find that a lot of them do want to get married. And I think, like you said, because of the pressure that is around, marriage is advisable. We know marriage is advisable. It's a shield for and a cover for the individual. You get rewarded more. But I think also that marriage, but also when we see that, you know, we see the rates of divorce also increasing. And I think that's because of how we truly do not know what marriage is. We've become so it's all about me.
It's a commercial thing now. There's so much, you know.
It's about the wedding.
Oh, my wedding dress and having a wedding planner. And
rather than planning your wedding, plan your marriage. Plan out how you're going to do.
And going on from that, I think the scary thing is that when perhaps people come to me and they'll say, like, you know, we're having difficulty in our marriage, and I just think, well, what? Unless there's, I always say personally, like, if there's abuse and things like that, then really, you know, that's a issue. But if you're looking at things that, oh, you know, I've just lost interest, there's no spark there, you know, marriage, like the generation of our parents and, you know, of our generation, commitment, you know, it's a compromise. I mean, you know, your sisters, you know, can give your own examples there and experiences, but it's not a bed of roses, as you said. And for people to go in, and I know speaking to my daughter and her friends and generation, they've been saying things like, you know, it's about getting the ring, it's getting the husband like he's a handbag, he's an accessory, and like, oh, I've made it in life, I've got this husband. Well, and then 2 years down the line, life is very hard because marriage is hard.
They don't understand the concept of true marriage until they're actually in it, and like you said, 2 years down the line, when, you know, they've been through the highs and the lows, and marriage is not a bed of roses. You
I think
have the good
social
days.
media makes it a lot worse. When you see another person's marriage, you're seeing the tiniest window into a very narrow part of their lives that they are willing to share.
And also, you know,
nice.
when people often, you know, a lot of people, not just often, put up pictures of themselves, husband and wife, smiling, and for the outside world, you automatically assume that they're so happy, they're so comfortable, they're so blessed. But actually, behind that smile, there's a lot of hidden meanings there. There's a lot of, you know, things that we don't know that's happened. And you put on a smile and you put on a brave face for the outside world, but actually they've been through quite a lot as a couple, and as every couple. And we have the perfect example of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, where knowing that he was going to be made shaheed, and knowing that Shah Qasim was going to be made shaheed, he still did the nikah of Shah Qasim to Sayyidah Sakina alayhi salam. So there has to be a reason, there has to be a lesson behind that to say, why did he do that? But also, you know, Zahra, you raised a very valid point where we are seeing, you know, there is a generation of people who are getting married very early, but there's also in our community those individuals, those girls, those boys, ladies, men who have not got married, you know, 30, 35, 40, 45. What happens to them? And they are, you know, perfectly eligible, they're educated, they're beautiful in their own rights, but what happens to them? How do they cope with the kind of taboo of I'm not married? And is there a kind of a upper limit where we often say, oh, she's too old, or he's too old? But
it's not for anybody to say, really.
It's not. I mean, but this is what I'm saying. Is there? And it's unfortunate, but that is sometimes how I feel our society is being shaped today, where we judge so much on that person's age, where you're 38 and you're not married.
But I think,
Definitely.
I mean, I've always lived my life with, you know what, people, you cannot please them. And your purpose and your goal and your aim and your pleasure is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you should always try to do what, as long as Allah has given you the permission, it's halal for you, don't worry about what people say. If you've got to the age of 35, 38, 45, 50, you know, wherever you are, you're a pensioner and you want to get married, go for it, because it's not haram for you. And I think society will want you to do what they want, but they're not going to be there for your days that you're miserable and old and got no company.
And we can never please everyone.
No, exactly.
You know?
So I think I think really we should be strong in ourselves and know who we are and what we want. And, you know, sometimes people can miss the boat because, you know, the right person didn't come along. And maybe that person will come later in life. You know, this is, like you said, Allah has created pairs, and when that pair comes, you know, you can ask him why he took so long.
The boat will always sail back.
Yes,
exactly.
No, honestly, to all the sisters that are perhaps reaching an older age and still haven't been married, I think number one is to remember that it's nothing to do with you. And I think sometimes there's a lot of self-doubt that can come in and say, you know, why haven't I got married? Why hasn't no one proposed to me? Why this? Why that? It's not that you're not desirable. It's not in any of that case. It's just that the right person hasn't come.
And it could be their test. That could be their particular test in life.
Exactly.
And number two, I want to say that use this period to focus on yourself. And I think sometimes you know, when someone is single, they're constantly thinking about focused on finding the other person. But this is a perfect opportunity to build upon yourself and become the person that you want to attract. And you know, sometimes, you know, if someone works on themselves and they concentrate into themselves, sometimes they find that that person just comes along and they're the perfect person. And number three, I would like to say it could happen overnight. I mean, me and my sisters all got married young, but there was and by the way, we all got married 1 year or even months between each other. And we all sat in London thinking, oh my God, because my older sisters got married abroad and where there was so much potential. And we all sat here thinking we're 18, 19, we're still not married. And then, subhanAllah, within a year, I got married. The next year, the second one got married. 2 months later, it was actually one night was my sister's wedding. The next night was my sister's engagement. That's how much.
Wow.
That's how fast.
So your parents had a busy period.
It was everyone's getting shipped off. But no, everyone's getting married during that period. So sometimes you can wait and think nothing. You know, I'm not going to get married. It can happen so quick. And just believe that this is your journey. Everyone has their own journey. Someone can have kids young. Someone can have kids older. Everyone has a unique journey. Someone could get married young. Just believe in your journey. Focus on yourself. And this is the time. It could happen.
And also, when you exactly, I'm going to elaborate on what you've just said about, you know, be the version, you know, focus on yourself. At the end of the day, our journey is alone. We came into this world alone. We're going alone. And in between, Allah has blessed us, you know, perhaps with a companion, perhaps not. It depends on what your test is in life. And be the best version of yourself. You know, go and do the things that perhaps when you're married, you have responsibility. You can't just get up and do. So either way, there's always a benefit and there's always the positive to see. And that's what we always need to focus on. Not that, oh, I haven't got that and I'm not happy. Just look at what you have and say, alhamdulillah, that you have life, health, and even, you know, in this country, even if you're in a wheelchair, you know, that we say it's a restriction, there's so much you can do. So there isn't any reason.
And unfortunately, I mean, this is a topic that we could talk about for a long time, but unfortunately we have run out of time today. I think taking lessons from today's topic, we know that there isn't a right or wrong age. It depends whether you're ready. And if your family are supportive and you are ready to get married, even if community sees you as too young and you feel that you are ready to get married, it's better than rather going into sin. And for those people who are older and they haven't got married, it doesn't mean that you know, you're too old. The person is still out there. And like our sisters were saying, it's a test and it's a trial from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. Until next time, viewers, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.